And good afternoon, everyone. TJ Alt, I-45 now, and Galveston now, and our weekly visit with Dr. Philip Keiser, the local health authority for the Galveston County Health District, Galveston County, and also the interim CEO of Galveston County Health District and Coastal Health and Wellness. After taking a much-needed vacation last week, which is with he and his bride, back with us here this week, and we're glad to have him on. And although I do believe I'm seeing his screen frozen again. Hopefully we'll, there it goes. There it goes. He was not asleep, folks. We should point that out. So we'll.
I went on vacation again.
Yeah. It's like we had issues there. So Dr. Keiser, as we're talking here today, taking a look at the new numbers that were released today, 317 additional positive cases. And there 309 of those are brand new, but about 300 recoveries as well at this time. I just wonder if you can go ahead and give us perspective of what we're looking at in this. Some call it wave, some call it surge, some call it a tidal wave, and talk to us about what you're seeing right now, and as we're dealing with this, because in many ways these are not numbers we have seen. And not numbers you had expected once vaccinations were available readily. And we're having a connection issue. We apologize, folks. Dr. Keiser's in.
Yeah, there we go.
There you go. You're back, sir.
Yeah. So I'm having some problems with connection. Let me make sure it's okay.
So anyway, yeah. So Dr. Keiser is having some issues on some connections. That sometimes the Wi-Fi is not the strongest in the world. There, we'll give him a chance to. While he's getting that, I'll watch him in the background here, and we'll do that. Let me go ahead and, as I was telling everyone, we had more than 300 additional cases, but also 394 recoveries that are in there. 309 of those cases are new ones. As we take a look at the numbers in Galveston County, again, these are Galveston County residents numbers that we're taking a look at here, and we're going to adjust this screen so you can see it a little bit better. For right now. So we apologize, kind of the rough start here with the show. There's some connectivity issues so far, but I'm taking a look right now at hospitalizations, and we'll wait for Dr. Keiser to come back in and talk more detail. Right now we have at around 100 and right at 144 people in the hospital right now. In the hospital that are Galveston County residents. And now we have Dr. Keiser back. And Phil, let me ask you, Dr. Keiser, we're looking at hospitalization rates. That's kind of the one thing to take a look at, is that we have around 100 and of 144 Galveston County residents in the hospital right now as we talk.
That's right.
That are an issue. This is not to been expected when vaccines were available. Why are we seeing this right now?
Well, because what we're seeing now is primarily a disease of unvaccinated people. So currently, we're running, about 140. I think UTMB hospitals are running about 180 to 200. HCA is running about 40 to 50. But also, these are kind of, in some ways, artificial numbers. Most of those people in the hospitals are Galveston County residents, but they also take some extra patients as they have beds that open up. And so, they're not going to take any more than they can handle. And so that way the hospitals don't collapse in terms of their ability to care for these people. But largely what we're seeing is unvaccinated people. We've had I think 27 breakthroughs that have been hospitalized. And so everyone else has pretty much been someone who has not been vaccinated.
And again, it's going, and we're already having some early questions, and we'll get to everyone's questions here in a little bit. But can you explain to me? I mean, you said to put in perspective here, of those that have been hospitalized, and that's the main focus in our conversation right now. You're saying of those 23 overall have 27. Been breakthroughs, meaning people fully vaccinated that go through. Some people would say, well, wait a second, why get vaccinated then if this is still going to get me sick?
Well, because we've had thousands of people hospitalized unvaccinated and 27 vaccinated. That's that's pretty simple, you know. I mean, if you think of it as money, you know, which is would you rather be thousands of dollars of debt or $27 of debt? You know, it's very clear that the vaccines keep people from getting hospitalized and dying from COVID. They're not perfect, they're not 100%, but they're really good.
Is it right now too? Because there are breakthrough cases that don't lead to serious illness or hospitalization,
That's
but
right.
we are seeing more and more of those. Is that that if people who are vaccinated are getting COVID, can we put that in perspective too? Of is the vaccine supposed to prevent you from getting COVID at all, or just not getting sick from COVID?
It does a little bit of both. I mean, it helps prevent people from getting COVID at all. It helps those who get COVID from getting sick, and it helps prevent those from getting sick from dying. So we've had 7 deaths in breakthroughs. We've had 418 now, and there's probably more coming today of people total. So of that 418, that means 411 of them weren't vaccinated. If you look at the number of people hospitalized, we've had about 27 people hospitalized compared to thousands of people hospitalized who haven't been vaccinated. And then if you look at breakthroughs, our last figure was 888, nice round number, and that's out of 189,000 people vaccinated. And so just the proportion of people who get disease, who get infected, who get sick, or who end up dying is much, much lower in those who are vaccinated. It's not perfect, but it's really good.
And when we talk about these cases, these are Galveston County residents that when you see 71 women, 73 men, that's not necessarily how many folks are in the hospitals at UTMB on Galveston, and UTMB League City, or HCA, Healthcare Houston in Texas City, because those will have patients from outside. And it's been a while since we've had to explain to folks how these numbers, what they really reflect, because it can be confusing when someone looks at like C-Track or something like that. They go, wait, those numbers are different than what we see here. You're actually looking at 2 separate sets of numbers, although they're somewhat related.
Right. From a public health point of view, we report based on county of residence, and that's a system that Texas has. Is that if you live in Galveston and you go to Austin for the weekend and you get COVID and you get hospitalized in Austin, you're counted as a Galveston County resident who gets COVID and hospitalized. Now, granted, most of these people that we're counting are actually here in Galveston County, but what things like CETRAC and other groups do is they're looking at hospital bed capacity. And with those capacities, what they're doing is they're actually counting the number of beds that are occupied by people with COVID. And so you will see those numbers are different. You'll see those numbers are going to be higher because UTMB, being a large referral center, does have people that aren't from Galveston County that get referred there and that get hospitalized there. So those numbers will be higher. Probably the most important thing to keep in mind, though, is that now we're operating at 99% plus capacity. And that's a big problem. I mean, we're close to the edge. We haven't gone over the edge, but we're close to the edge, and we're probably going to be close to the edge for a while.
And Stephanie Gutierrez has a question I was going to ask anyway, so I'll let her ask it. How many of those patients have had COVID before? Because we talk about breakthroughs as breakthroughs of those who've been vaccinated. There should be some protection. We don't know how robust it could be. For those who had COVID before, some immunity in there. So let me ask that: is that how many of? Is there any tracking going on of how many folks had COVID before, but then recovered and then got COVID again and have ended up in the hospital? Is that being tracked as well?
Yeah. So I haven't done it this week or last week, so I'm a little bit behind. But basically, what we've done is we've actually tracked that. And so if you are, remember, only 40-some thousand people have had COVID in our county. So the best way to look at it is in terms of what's your ratio, or how many times more likely you are to end up in the hospital. So if you've had COVID before, you're about 2 to 3 times more likely to end up in the hospital with COVID than someone who'd been vaccinated. All right. But if you've neither been vaccinated nor had COVID, you're about 70 to 80 times more likely to end up in the hospital. So yeah, having COVID does help prevent you from getting COVID again. But that being said, we have had people that have gotten COVID again. And we've even had people that have gotten COVID, got vaccinated, and got COVID again. So,
Right.
so none of these things are 100%. If you're looking for a single 100% answer, you're not going to get it. But having COVID and recovered is better than not having COVID. And having COVID and being vaccinated is better than having COVID or not having COVID.
And you just answered, I think, Stephanie's next question was how many patients that are unvaccinated have had COVID before. Many people are questioning whether or not to get vaccinated because they currently have the antibodies from when they had COVID before.
Right.
The recommendation is still to get.
Yeah. And the reason why we recommend that, we have two reasons. So one, the antibody question is, so I got antibodies, but the question is, are they the right kind of antibodies? And the vaccine makes you get antibodies that are directly against the virus. And so that's going to give you better protection than COVID in and of itself. One of the other things, though, I think that people are doing, is they're kind of relying on the antibody test to decide whether they need to get vaccinated or not. And the problem is these antibody tests don't give us the numbers that we need to do. They only tell us whether it's positive or negative. Whereas in a research laboratory, they actually measure the amount of antibodies that are present and can see what that level is, whether it's at this level, or this level, or this level. And so the reason why it's being recommended now that people that don't have good immune systems get a third shot is because they're not here, they may have antibody levels there. That's the first thing. The second thing is we also know that those people with antibodies level here, they're actually getting sick. We didn't know that initially, but now we do. So, and unfortunately, we don't have a good test. I wish we had one where we could just, measure everybody's antibodies and say, okay, TJ, you're good. Oh, Keiser, you need to get another shot. But the people are working on that, and hopefully we'll have that early next year.
Obviously, a lot of focus is on the hospital capacity that's out there.
Lost you again.
Okay, so sorry about that, Dr. Kaiser. You hear me back again?
Yeah. I think
folks,
we had on my part.
No. This was on our end. We had a weird glitch that hit us, and I apologize to you folks for this. Is that we've both of us having technical problems along the way. Let me see if I can get. We had a glitch on our end that shut everything down, and I was bringing up the C-track numbers, which were an important part of what we're trying to talk about on hospitalizations here. So I'm going to bring that back up. C-track is what we use in the state to keep up with hospitalization rates and the like, and bed availability. And I'm going to bring up just Galveston County because we did have this thing, folks saying, "Hey, these numbers don't correspond with what I'm seeing," and the like. And I want to make sure we're clear on this with what these numbers really mean. So now we'll go ahead and bring this up. So again, I apologize, folks, for we had the glitch there. We're back now, be able to look at it. So hopefully folks can make out what I'm focusing on right here is the bed availability for most recent day. It's hard to zoom in on this dashboard. This is just in Galveston County. And what I'm going to try to do here too is zoom in on just that chart so folks can see that. And let me bring that up right now. Sorry, we're doing this on the fly. We had it all set and then everything crashed on us. So we apologize for that. Did not mean for that to happen, obviously. And of course, everything is now wanting not to cooperate with us. So let me just kind of read it off to folks here so they can, it's not going to be exact, be really clear for folks. But let me bring up the chart now so you can see it a little bit better. What we're showing is in the last 24 hours, that's the off to the left there, those blue charts, at 17 admissions into the hospital in the last 24 hours for COVID. Those are new COVID admissions in Galveston County Hospital. So there's 3 hospitals we're talking about here. They are UTMB Health Galveston, UTMB League City Health League City, and HCA Houston Healthcare Mainland. Those are the hospital systems that are in Galveston County that we're talking about there. And right now, what it is just showing in the county, what we have there is it's showing that ICU capacity, adult ICU, that's 8% of those in the hospital right now. And then the other request, of making up there of coming in. But right now we're tracking roughly about, how many folks are we actually counting in the hospital in Galveston County hospitals right now?
It's about, I think here they're showing 120 COVID patients, that's pretty close to where we're tracking as well.
129, correct?
Right, 129, right, and we're tracking somewhere around 120 in.
Now to track that out, when we have the patient census, which is that 564 number, that's there. That's a number of people in the hospital overall.
That's correct.
Correct, right now. So 129 of 564 people in the hospital. Are COVID patients. That's the data, and those are the 3 hospitals in Galveston County. And we could break this out, Harris County, Brazoria County, if we wanted to, but we're taking a look at those. So right now, as we speak, in the hospital capacity right now, 129 of 564 people who are in the hospital are COVID patients. That is almost 23%, close to a quarter of those in the hospital right now are COVID patients, to give people perspective. And I just want to have you reiterate what we talked about. So when we are talking about, yes, we want you to get vaccinated, we don't want you to get COVID, it is really to prevent these hospitalizations and what could come beyond that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And also keep in mind, when you're talking about a quarter, 30% of your hospital beds being filled with COVID, that means that's people that don't have COVID don't have access to that bed. And so people with heart disease can't necessarily get treatment for their heart disease. People with cancer can't get treatment for their cancer. So far, the hospitals have been able to continue to function. But for example, at UTMB, they have canceled some elective procedures because it would require you to be overnight in an ICU. And then if you're overnight in an ICU, that means that there's not enough ICU capacity there to take care of you, and they don't want to end up in that situation. And so all of the institutions are facing this, not just Galveston, not just other counties. All of them are facing this. But if you look at Texas overall, it's Galveston, Harris County, Brazoria County, Chambers County are some of the highest rates in the state. And so our area really is, we're as bad as any other place in the country right now. And we've been very fortunate that we've been able to maintain our services. But we've already seen up in Harris County that Memorial Hermann, I believe, is shutting down some of their urgent care centers because they don't have enough staff to run them. And that's the real problem that we're facing, is getting enough nurses and enough doctors to take care of all these people. And quite frankly, people are really getting tired and people getting burned out. And so it's hard to keep the staffing up to the levels to take care of all these folks.
And now the numbers we're looking at now, this is Harris County. So of the total number of, it's 10,091 people in the hospital overall across Harris County hospitals, which, by the way, would include UTMB Health in Webster.
Yes,
as
that's
part
right.
of this.
Yeah, right.
It would include HCA Houston Healthcare Clear Lake, would include Methodist in Nassau Bay.
That's right.
Those 3 hospitals. Of those 10,091 patients, 1,983 are COVID patients. 636 of those are in COVID ICU, and 85 are in the COVID surge unit. But right now, almost 20% of the patients in Harris County hospitals are COVID patients. To give a perspective, if you, and I asked Dr. Sharma this, if you were running a hospital and you saw one particular ailment, no matter what it is, make up 20 to 25% of your hospitalization, what would your reaction be to take action on that?
Oh, God, that would be my reaction. That's probably the only thing I can say. It's not a 4-letter word. I mean, this is really bad. And if these trends continue and the numbers go up, we're not going to have the capacity to take care of everybody. But there's also another problem that even at the levels at which we're working at, it's wearing everybody out. We're having staff out because of burnout. We're having staff leave because they're sick with COVID or they have family members sick with COVID. And so there are so many ripple effects that go with this. The other problem is that people that have COVID, particularly if they're in the ICU, don't stay in the ICU overnight or for a few days. They can be there for weeks. So they tie up that bed for a much longer period of time. And it's very, very resource intensive to take care of someone with COVID once they get sick.
Now, the other, and I like this one, Mark Shawlett. I like it in one way that it's, and I want to bring up because this is something that it's a fair argument, because I don't think it's put enough perspective. And we have pointed this out at least on our programs constantly, that when we say that there's the capacity of that, we're not talking about the physical rooms at a hospital. Staffing is just as important, if not more important, than the actual physical rooms from here.
Right.
Staffing is a major issue, and we had on last Wednesday the nursing recruiter from UTMB Health and the head of nursing for UTMB Health both tell us that right now finding the nurses you have to do, and when the ICU unit comes in, you need one nurse for 2 patients. It's not one nurse for, I think the average is you want to do 1 for 9 on general, but for ICU, it's 1 for 2 patients. So you need more staffing in there and go through. And that is a genuine problem right now. And you had just said it. Folks are overworked. Finding the healthcare workers is the tough situation right now. And that's putting more of a burden on getting care in there than anything else, is it not?
Yeah, that's our biggest problem. So for example, right now throughout UTMB hospitals, they're running a census of over 700. They're budgeted for 600 beds. Okay, and they've just finished some renovations at John Sealy Hospital, which have been planned for a long time, but they're opening it up sooner so that they have even more space that they can put people into. But the question is who's going to take care of them? And getting those nurses is very difficult, and particularly in ICUs, it's very difficult because an ICU nurse is not your average nurse. They're very specialized, very, very highly trained, and they work extremely long hours and work very hard. Often they'll do 12-hour shifts. And if you can imagine, if you're an ICU nurse now, you are extremely valuable, and they command huge salaries. And so it's hard to hire nurses because if a nurse is willing to travel somewhere, she can get a job making tons of money, or he or she, I should say, can get a job making tons of money in a very, very short period of time. And so sometimes people are leaving. We have requested nurses from the state, and we've gotten some more. We've gotten some to work at the health department. We've gotten some to work at UTMB, and so they're out there. But that is our major problem: is the staffing more so than the bed capacity. Seems to have disappeared again.
Yeah, and there we go. We had the short. My apologies. It is and sorry, we're both having technical issues here. And speaking on that staffing issue, I want to go ahead and bring up some. This is something we brought up. Now, these numbers are based on as of August the 20th. So I have not updated these yet. This is from DSA Marlowe from UTMB and set it over. Now these are just UTMB figures that I'm going to give you here. Speaking of that, and comparing last year to this year when we're looking at the nursing census here, and where the change goes, that COVID ICU unit that we're looking at here of how many are available and are actually on staff. And as we look at this, and you look at, some folks may see, well, we have more than we did last year, but that was last year at this time when we actually starting to see a downward trend, and we're in an upward trend right now of the number of patients that are going in right now. Med surge is barely above what it was last year, staffing was, but these numbers right here, as we were talking the other day, is that there's actually more of a demand right now. So these numbers, by comparison, comparing last year to this year, is off because these are low for what is actually needed right now. Correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So just to give folks kind of a perspective of that, it's not enough just to look at the numbers. It looks at what that goes along the way. And nurses are going to be, there is the burnout factor, and so that, and then trying to find the funds out there. And there's been some issues about that the state needs to do more and the like to go that way. So that's part of it as well. If you're just joining us, Dr. Philip Keiser of the local health authority for Galveston County is on with us right now. He's got to get out of here at 3:30, so we're going to kind of go through this. Pfizer vaccine fully approved now from the FDA, no longer emergency authorization. A lot of there are a lot of folks we heard, well, it's only emergency, I'm not going to do it.
It's time.
Yeah. But you had said you were growing frustrated in that it was taking so long to get to that point.
Sure, I was.
Because of the data that's out there. Can you talk about what the data is showing on the vaccinations right now?
Yeah, I think the data is showing that these vaccinations are both effective, that they prevent getting infected with COVID, they prevent getting hospitalized with COVID, and they prevent dying with COVID. They also show that it's extraordinarily safe. We keep hearing stories about this vaccine and the other vaccine having problems, but you don't hear that about the Pfizer vaccine. And we have more data on these vaccines than any other vaccine in history. We've given it to hundreds of millions of people. We do know that that after getting the vaccine, that people can have some body aches and a sore shoulder, and certainly I had that. But we know that seems to be the major thing. We know that people dying from an allergic reaction right away from a vaccine is very, very unusual. But we also see that that some people have some rare side effects. I saw a person not so long ago whose face swelled up. Nobody knows why. We don't know why. First time anybody's ever seen it. And so all we could say to him was, you probably shouldn't get the vaccine. But that's after personally overseeing giving vaccines to 180,000 people. It's the first time we've seen that. It does not cause heart disease. It causes some myocarditis or inflammation around the heart in teenage boys that lasts for a few days and goes away with Tylenol. Hasn't killed anybody from that yet. It does not cause young women to not to get pregnant. It does not get into your DNA. It does not have a chip in it. It does not cause your immune system to collapse. We know these things. And anybody that tells you otherwise is either lying to you or they're misinformed. And so we have a lot of good information, more than any other thing we've ever rolled out in history.
And right now, obviously, in what you're looking at is video from what is now the return of the drive-through, the mass drive-through vaccinations that are happening no longer at Walter Hall Park. They're actually happening weekdays at the Galveston County Health District.
That's right.
Either it's your first or second shot or your booster. You can do both. Most of the folks who have gone through, sorry for the bad camera work. That's actually my work right there. Me reading the camera. And I actually, and right now we've said, okay, it's for the immune compromised, but I'm one of those who's not immune compromised. I went ahead and got the booster. I was offered it while I was out there. One of the things is there's plenty of vaccine. Can you talk about that? Because
plenty of vaccine.
Right now, while that's the so-called protocol, it's a recommended protocol. It's not a requirement, correct?
Well, here's how it works. So basically, the FDA has said, or the CDC has said, that we can give a third shot. In fact, it's recommended for people who are immune compromised. And by immune compromised, they mean those people that have cancer that's undergoing treatment, if you have AIDS, if you've had a transplant, if you're being treated with steroids. It's pretty broad, that level. And then it asks people to attest that they're immune compromised. But the reality is that the federal government absolutely plans to give everybody a booster. And so what we've done is we've asked people to attest, to say, yeah, I'm immune compromised. We're not going to challenge that and ask you questions about it. And, we know that some people may not meet the technical definition of immune compromised, but if people want a third shot, we're ready and willing to give it to them. But also knowing that those recommendations are going to change within less than a month, probably within about 3 weeks. So we're just getting started now. One of the things we're struggling with now is how to do this. Right now we've been doing it through a drive-through, and it's really nice and convenient for the people coming through, but it's really hard on our staff because of the heat. And so we're exploring some options to potentially move it inside, at least while it's hot, to protect our staff while we're doing it.
On that, though, I will point out that I've talked to several people who showed up that day. This was the first day last week this being offered, who said they only came because they could drive up.
I know.
Really, they're and I don't know how much of a percentage that is, but a lot of people don't want to go inside a clinic.
Yeah, I know.
Right now,
right,
and they prefer to do the drive-through. I found that interesting. I didn't expect that answer, and it was about maybe 6 or 7 people, of maybe about 50 in line at the time when I talked to these folks. But I did find that interesting.
Well, there's lots of good reasons to do a drive-through, right? Not just for the fact that it's convenient and I like it, because you also have elderly people who getting out of the car and walking could be difficult. And on one hand, we're saying, well, it's really hot for our staff to be working out there, but it's also going to be hot for elderly people to be walking to get a shot. And then you can put 3 and 4 people in a car and get them vaccinated. And the other thing we're doing is, if we're finding drivers that are not vaccinated who are bringing grandma, and we're going, hey, you want to get vaccinated? And so we're doing them on the spot.
That actually happened a couple of times, and I was done on the spot too. I had no intention of at the time. I was going to wait. But was my buddy Gretchen there at the health district, who I always jokingly say to her, "Where's my shot?" That's just a line she and I use. She said, "I got one," and I said, "Well, I'm not immune compromised." And she said, "Wait, don't, no." And we talked about it, and then you weren't available; you were out. But I was like, "Okay." And I'm one of those who did the mix and match, and I did Moderna that day, and did it on camera. With Gretchen doing that in there, and it was just offered because there is plenty. I didn't want to take it from anyone, but it was interesting to have to be able to do that.
Yeah,
I've been telling folks the same thing.
You're not taking anything from anybody. We have plenty. The current recommendation is whatever you got, you get vaccinated with that one again, because there's some data on that. Although there's no reason to believe that if you get a different shot that it won't help you. But we're still waiting on that, and we don't know for sure. And so that's why that recommendation is to only do the vaccine that you had before.
Back to school. There's a lot of fights over mask mandates and the like. Let me just get into an area. This came up in talking with some of it yesterday. A packed school board meeting, Clear Creek ISD, and it wasn't even on the agenda to talk about masking or anything like that. But we had a couple of classrooms in Clear Creek ISD this week, one at Goforth Elementary, one at Ross, in which the classrooms themselves are shut down for the week because of a positive test in there. And there's some more getting close to 10% threshold, meaning 10% of the student population or staff population, combination of both, are going to be testing positive with COVID. And now the rules are different from the state now as far as shutting down campuses, shutting down classrooms and the like in individuals. But you have authority to quarantine certain people.
That's right.
One, can you explain to folks what authority you have?
Sure.
And do you plan on using it?
Yeah. So under the governor's orders, no public official can mandate masks. We can't mandate that people get vaccinated, and so we're not doing that. We strongly recommended that schools facilitate masks, meaning that that they provide an environment where it's easy for kids to wear masks, and also ask them to model that behavior. So if you're a supervisor or a principal or a superintendent, please wear a mask, because if people see you doing it, then they'll do it as well. We've also asked them to have a mechanism whereby if I want my child to wear a mask, that when he gets to school, he doesn't just go, "Bop," and nobody pays attention to it. And so that way parents who feel strongly that they want their child to wear a mask will know that their child is wearing a mask, just as those parents who feel strongly that they don't want their kids to wear a mask, they're not being forced to. We want to make sure that there's an even playing field there. But these are all recommendations and not anything that we can force people to do. What I can do as the local health authority is that if someone has COVID, we can quarantine them or basically tell them they have to stay home. And those orders actually have the force of law. And if people violate that, they can be subjected to both civil and criminal penalties for violating that. We've used that very rarely in this epidemic so far. And part of the reason is that most people are very cooperative. You say, "Look, you got to stay home." And they go, "Do I really have to?" And I go, "Yeah, you do." And they go, "Okay." Every now and then we get somebody who goes, "You can't make me." And we go, "Actually, I can." And they go, "Oh." And then they cooperate with us. So it's only been with very rare exception where by people who had COVID who were refusing to stay home and were putting other people at risk that we've actually exercised that option. The other option we have is that we can close down buildings for a period of time, in so much as that to try and mitigate any infection that would be inside. So one of the things that would qualify as that would be a school, for example. If a particular school or particular classroom had lots of cases of COVID, we can actually say, you have to close it down. Again, we've never had to do that because the schools have all been very cooperative with us in doing this. So we've gotten to at one point where we were considering last year closing down a high school. And the school superintendent said, "Wait a minute, look, we're doing all this stuff," and we agreed to hold off. And sure enough, next couple of days, their cases dropped down, and we didn't feel like there was a need to. But yes, under the governor's, under state law and under all the governor's orders, the local health authorities still have the ability to quarantine individuals and to close down buildings for a period of time in response to an infection within that building. I can't say, "Oh, I'm worried you might get COVID here, so you have to close schools." Okay, and I have no intention of doing that either. But we'll keep all our options open and try to keep a attitude of facilitating things with the schools and trying to work with them so that they can provide good education for their students at the same time as protecting them from getting infections.
And to clarify here is that you have this authority if there's certain thresholds met.
That's correct, and there's no numerical threshold. I mean, it's basically my judgment, and what we look at is we look at the numbers of cases in a school, and if we see a lot of cases in a school, we'll ask the question, okay, how does this compare to the community around them? How does this compare to the other schools around them? And it becomes pretty obvious, after a while you'll see something that's like, oh my God, here this one high school is just blown up. They've got, 5 times more cases than anybody else. And then you look at their numbers of in their community, and it's 5 times higher than you see in the neighborhoods around them. And then you go, oh, they just had a big basketball tournament, and you go, oh, okay, now we know what's going on there. And so it's things where you got to put the whole picture together. And it has to be something that you feel comfortable that if somebody wants to take you to court, you feel comfortable going into court and justifying it. And so, we don't consider these things lightly. We take those things very seriously, but we do have that authority.
And again, I want to just, as I asked the question when we started, is that because you'll take heat for it. How are you willing? And you said it's rare. It was rare before, but these are different times. Are you willing to take on maybe more than anything else, ridicule from Austin, much less the school, to say we're shutting down this campus, or these 30 kids tested positive, they all have to stay home until they're clean or clear?
We very early on we did some things with nursing homes and shut down some things. And initially, there were some people from Austin that were very unhappy with me, and that at the end of the day, they adopted all of the mitigation protocols that we laid out in our initial order. So, I think you have to do what you think the right thing is, and we have to follow the law. And I think that's the most important thing. So, if people think that I'm going to sit here and say, you must mask, that's not going to happen. All right. Right now, the governor says you can't mask. That whole question, you can't force people to mask, let's say it that way. And that whole question is being litigated, and the courts so far have been all over the place. And so as far as we're concerned, the governor's order stands, and we're going to follow the law.
Let me get in a couple of questions. I know you got to get out of here, so until they come and pull the hook on you, I'm going to keep you here for just a little bit because we got started late and had some in. This is one I get a lot, because someone will show me the size of a box of masks and say, "See, doesn't prevent viruses."
Yeah.
So, and I myself said, "All right, where's the documentation that prove that masks work?" And I think one of the things that gets missed is that if you have a mask on, some people think that that's a barrier for you. It's actually the opposite in more general sense.
Right.
And as it was explained to me, Dr. Sharma and Dr. Patel kind of pointed out something to me. It says, when you see a doctor or a nurse wear a mask before COVID in a hospital, they're not wearing that mask to protect themselves necessarily. They're wearing it to protect you from getting something from them onto you, because they've seen people. So can you explain the data that supports masks? Is there actually something somewhere that says this works?
There's multiple studies that have gone and looked at masking and shown that they do have an effect in terms of reducing number of particles that come out of your nose, in reducing the particle size, and actually in reducing rates of infection. And the main reason behind the CDC telling people that they should wear masks again was because with the Delta variant, people who had been vaccinated now had enough virus in their nose that they could spread it to other people. And so by masking up, you could help prevent that. I think a lot of the confusion comes from people think of this as a binary thing. Masks work, masks don't work. That's actually, in some ways, kind of a silly discussion, because it's not do they work or do they don't work. It's do they help reduce transmission. So if that's what work means, then yes. Do they prevent all transmissions? No. So, I think we got to make sure we're clear what we're talking about here. But if I wear a mask and you wear a mask, the chances of either one of us transmitting that virus to the other person is very, very low. And we've certainly seen that. And we've seen it in our own community. When we look at when everybody was wearing masks, look at the rates of infection. People were still wearing masks in Galveston County up until mid-June, and our rates continued to go down. Okay. And what happens? CDC say you don't have to wear masks. Everybody stopped wearing their mask, and then suddenly the rates started taking up again. And so they have a benefit. It's one piece of of what we need to do to protect ourselves. It's not 100%, but it's one piece, and I think an important piece, and one of the least obtrusive pieces. The easiest way to end this thing is just lock everybody up in their house, right? We did that, but how many times can you watch Tiger Kings? People are not going to do that. But on the other hand, wearing a mask is not very obtrusive. You can still go around and do your business, and everything's fine.
And also too, I wanted to bring up, this came up a lot, and I can't remember that it's something that deworms horses.
Oh, ivermectin. Yeah.
Ivermectin. Yeah. I mispronounced that. That's been coming up to the point that a warning had to be put out on this. Yeah. How did this become into the conversation at all that was a COVID treatment?
It's a very convoluted argument, and unfortunately, we see a lot of these convoluted arguments have gotten into the popular culture with COVID, and so one of the big things is that ivermectin, it kills worms, and we actually use it in people, and it's used a lot in a variety of livestock and also with dogs, but ivermectin does have some immune modulating effects. So it not only kills the worms, but it keeps you from having an immunologic reaction against it. And that's why it seems to be so effective in what it does. So some people thought, oh, it modulates your immune system. We know that the really bad parts of COVID are because of the immune reaction. So let's give you something to modulate the immune system. So I give people something to modulate the immune system. And ivermectin may be one of them. Except there's a problem. We tried it and it didn't work. Okay, it's that simple. We tried it and it didn't work. People that got ivermectin have done no better than people who have not gotten ivermectin. So you hear lots of stories about how various drugs are effective with COVID, but keep in mind that COVID runs everywhere from asymptomatic to mild disease to getting really sick to even dying. So if you take a bunch of people who have mild disease and you give them ivermectin, you say, oh, they got better. Well, they'd have gotten better anyway. So that's why you need to have these comparative studies where you compare it to people who get it and don't get it. And that's why you need to use it in people that are sick so that you can see, does it really make a difference in the end game? And the answer is it doesn't do it. Same thing happened with hydroxychloroquine, and a year ago, we had nothing, and people asked me, "Should we use hydroxychloroquine?" And I was, I don't know, maybe worth a try. And we certainly tried using it here for a while in Galveston, but at the end of the day, it really didn't seem to have an effect, so we've stopped using that.
And then hydrochloroquine keeps coming up as well on that, and again too. And while I got a lot, and I point out, you said you wish it had not gotten political. Hey, try, grasp everything you can. It had some mixed results in use in Texas City. But as more and more studies got done, it kind of the same thing, not as effective as some had hoped.
Right. That's right. And we saw this a lot very early on in the AIDS epidemic. So I'm showing my age here. But in the early 90s, people were grasping at all sorts of things, and we tried all sorts of stuff. In retrospect, some of it kind of crazy, some of it stupid. But we also learned the hard way that even when you start grasping at straws when you have nothing, that it's okay to try it, but when it's clear it doesn't work, you're better off abandoning it. And so I think that's what happens with some of these things. They get into the public consciousness and people have a hard time abandoning it. And we've actually moved along, and we have better therapies. We have antibodies, we have remdesivir, we have drugs that modulate the immune system. And it's very interesting, even though our numbers of deaths are increasing, if you look at our latest count, our death rate has dropped a little bit. We're down in 1%. What's that mean? That means we're getting better at treating this illness. Now, we don't want anybody in the hospital. We don't want them on a ventilator. But we're better than we were a year ago.
Speaking of treatments, a therapy that got a lot more attention here last week when Governor Abbott, fully vaccinated, tested positive for COVID, and the monoclonal antibody infusion therapy. In fact, we're seeing some clinics across the way open up. UTMB already has an infusion. It's not really a clinic, I guess. But yeah, you can get it.
There are 4 sites. where you
for
can
sites that in which it's available. Now, this is not something you can necessarily come in and request. Like, hey,
actually
I've
you
been
can.
vaccinated. Let me go in. Well,
actually you can.
you can. I mean, but not if you're not tested positive.
Well, we want people to have a positive test.
Right. And that's what I'm trying to get. What I'm trying to say is it's not a preventative. You can't just go walk in the door and say, "Yeah, give me the infusion."
Well, actually, it's been licensed now to do that. So,
well, I guess I was wrong.
That's something that's happened like in the past three weeks or so. So if you were exposed and were high risk, it's okay to give you this antibody to keep you from getting it. Where we're using it primarily in people that have disease, that have COVID, and they're either very high risk or they're having enough symptoms that we're worried that they might get bad enough to get in the hospital, and then we go ahead and we give them these antibody infusions, and it keeps people from getting into the hospital. And so we started doing this, probably 6-8 weeks ago. We'd had it for a while, but we really started ramping it up as the epidemic started ramping up again. And so now we're doing probably about 100 a day, maybe not quite, but probably about 100 a day. And every one of those we do, it decreases the chance that someone will end up really sick and in the hospital. So we think it's very important. So, Governor Abbott getting that, I thought was absolutely appropriate. If I were his doctor, I would have recommended to him, at least knowing what I know about, his health conditions at this point.
And how widely available is it, though? So we don't want a mad rush here if there's not as much available.
Yeah, no, we've got plenty. The big problem is getting people scheduled. It can even be given with a sub-Q injection, except you got to get 4 of them. So it's like 1, 2, and then 1 in each cheek, 3, 4 shots, and you don't have to stay there for a whole hour and get an infusion or have an IV put in. And some people who get it say it's really no big deal and it hasn't been a problem. We'd like to get more people doing the sub-Q injection because we can do them a lot faster, which means we could service a lot more people. But
which injection again? I'm sorry.
A sub-Q, a subcutaneous injection. So instead of getting an infusion and you're on an IV, you get 4 shots, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you're done. And it works just as well.
I had not heard that part of it as well. So, and again, correction, if you can request it. And in fact, if you go to the UTMB Health COVID page, it's there.
That's right.
As a link to follow up on it. And so that's an interesting thing. So I know you got to get out. We have the question that's been asked a lot of times. And I want to bring this up because this is one. I think we've debunked this 1,000 times now. The infamous Dr. Malone from the old, they say inventor of mRNA technology. That's not necessarily accurate.
Right.
Speaking out against it, can you? And I get it. There are going to be some who question this in the medical field.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. He's an interesting guy. I mean, certainly he did some work with mRNA technology early on, but there are also a lot of other people. So I wouldn't hold him as the authority on it. I mean, he's simply one person out of many that have been involved in it. But in terms of there's a risk to escape variance, I mean, that's possible regardless of what the technology is that did it. It's mainly if you have a lot of people who get infected, and then you start having people that had the vaccine getting infected. At some point, one of them may actually escape. One of those mutations may occur, which the vaccine may not be effective toward. We haven't had that yet, and everybody's worried about it. But we're keeping a close eye on it, and that's why we monitor mutations that occur every week in the samples that we get.
I think I do want to set up a show where we're just going to have folks that don't believe any of this and come on. That's the only questions we're going to take the whole time.
Okay.
And, but I want to prepare you for that. Do join us though next week at same time, 2:30. We're going to take a little bit different tack next week in that we're going to be focusing on advice for business owners. And we're working with the COVID-19 Business Task Force in Galveston County, as well as the local chambers of commerce. And the head of that task force, Hank Doogie, will be on with us. Dr. Keiser will be on with us. And we're going to tackle things of how businesses, particularly small businesses, need to be dealing as we move on. As what are the smart pieces of advice for them to keep not only their customers safe, but also their patients as well. Their staff as well. So they don't become patients, I guess we should say. So that's going to come up next Tuesday. So make sure you're joining that. And we're working with the COVID-19 task force here that are coming up. Sorry about the technical difficulties, folks. We didn't get to all your questions here. I do ask this, though, folks, is that there are a lot of folks commenting. We do ask that you go ahead during the show, ask questions. It's not like Jeopardy. Ask it in the form of a question. Ask questions, because going through this is a little bit hard to get you out there to get those out. And again, the important stat here to know is that of the hospitalizations we're seeing right now, 95% are not vaccinated. That's the data right there that we're talking about along the way. And then my last question to you is: do you see? Because we saw this even before the vaccines, this kind of wave and sort of. Do we see this easing up, knowing there's not going to be a mask mandate?
No.
We've seen an increase in vaccinations, but do you see this kind of going off?
I hope so. I don't know. The big unknown factor is what effect are schools going to have on this? We're all worried about that because school kids are largely unvaccinated, and that's just because the vaccine's not available for them. And so we don't know what that effect is going to be. If we look to last year, schools reflected what was going on in the community, and only rarely did they have real outbreaks in schools that were above and beyond what was going on in the community. So we're just going to have to wait and see.
Gotcha. Dr. Philip Keiser, local health authority for Galveston County, also the interim CEO of the Galveston County Health District. Should notice that I know you were on vacation there, but we had a good school supply drive. With that ran out the first time within 20 minutes. And then, but some great partners. HCA Houston Healthcare Tech Mainland stepped up. So did Coastal Community Credit Union stepped up, made some more donations, and got those school supplies out there as well. And again, thanks for the time, Dr. Keiser. We appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us here today. We'll be back again next Tuesday, 2:30. And again, that will be when we have the COVID-19 Business Task Force on with us. So we're going to be really focused on business-related questions there for that. And a lot of the guests will be on talking about that as well. I'm TJ Alts, I-45 down.